I'd like to tell you all about Ephraim Halevi. I really would. But if I told you everything there is to know about him, unfortunately, we might not be meeting here alive tonight. So, to ensure our safety for all of us, I'll just provide the published highlights. Ephraim was born in the United Kingdom and made Aliyah to Israel at an historic time in 1948. You could say that map of being involved in earth-shaking events will continue to be a trend for the following decades of his life. After graduating from law school, he began working with the Mossad in 1961, where he remained over the next 35 years. Between 1990 and 1995, under the directorship of Shabtai Shavit, he served as deputy director. It was during that time when Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin asked him to play a pivotal role in sensitive negotiations with King Hussein that eventually led to Israel's peace agreement with Jordan. In 1996, he left the Mossad to become the Israeli ambassador to the European Union in Brussels. But, like Michael Corleone in The Godfather Part 3, just when he thought he was out, they pulled him back in. And in March 1998, Ephraim became the director of the Mossad, following the resignation of Danny Aton. He served in that position through 2002, when he was appointed by Prime Minister Ariel Sharon as the second head of the National Security Council. He later served as the head of the Center for Strategic and Policy Studies at Hebrew University, a position he just left at the beginning of this year. And he's the author of several books, including Man in the Shadows, Inside the Middle East Crisis with a Man Who Led the Mossad, as well as being a frequent contributor to the opinion pages of the Jerusalem Post. With our region as volatile as it's ever been, with instability reigning in our north and our south, and existential threats facing us from Iran, Ephraim's insight can help unravel the codes and messages we're seeing passed back and forth every day from the region's leaders and shapers. Ephraim Halevi himself has played a major role in the shaping of our country. And he's done it all with impeccable British manners and perfect English. Please join me in welcoming Ephraim Halevi.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you here on this wintry night in the relatively cold Jerusalem semi-frost. I am here just because of one person, a member of your congregation, Jack Friedel, who decided that I would have to be here, and who relentlessly bore me down until I surrendered. I've known Jack for the last few years. We've both been members of the Israel Executive Committee of the Shefter Institute for Jewish Studies. And Jack has played a pivotal role in that committee, and I have played a role which is a non-committee. What's, I think, characteristic of the situation in this part of the world, that you can lecture every week, and every week you can say something totally different the week before. The situation here is very volatile. It is forever changing, there and back. And I've decided to speak this evening about our biases. And through discussing some of our biases, I would like to address some of the key issues that we are facing today. The first bias, which I think we are all victims of in one way or another, is a bias which is very understandable. By the way, all the biases are understandable. They have to be, I think, always taken with a grain of salt, maybe more than a grain of salt. All of our biases are well-founded, logical, human, and acceptable. The number one bias that we have is the result of our suffering 2,000 years of exile. And of being a victim for 2,000 years, both of the fact that we were dispersed among the nations, but also that we were the victims of repeated waves of anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish activity, which culminated in various stages of our history in massive loss of life. Whether it was the Spanish Inquisition, whether it was the pogroms of Eastern Europe, whether it was the way sometimes the Muslim societies treated Jews, and of course the last and the most poignant of all, the Holocaust. And when we emerged from World War II, with a third of the nation destroyed and exterminated by the Nazis, and we proceeded within the space of 3 years, from 45 to 48, to decide that the Jewish state would be established in this country, in this part of the world. There were only 600,000 Jews in this country. I'd like to mention that. Whereas 30 years before that, in 1918, there were only between 50 or 60,000 Jews in this part of the world. So we grew 10 times within 30 years, from 60 to 600,000. But nevertheless, we were a numerical minority as we faced the war of 1948. And the truth of the matter is that the powers that be and the experts that be and were at the time, including renowned generals of World War II, the most distinguished of which was General George Marshall, who was the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army in World War II, and who in 1948 was the Secretary of State of the United States of America, or as we would say in, I think, Australia, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They were convinced that the Jewish 600,000 community in this country did not stand a chance of surviving a war with the Muslim states surrounding us and with the Palestinians in this part of the world. And they tried at the last minute to convince the President of the United States at the time, Harry S. Truman, to allow them to take action in order to save the Jewish community here. And when ultimately the decision was taken by what was then the embryonic government at the time of Israel, because we were not then a state, to declare a state, the vote went between 6-4 and 4 against. There were 10 people in the room, chaired by David Ben-Gurion, who decided there would be a Jewish state declared in 1948. And it was not a foregone conclusion that we would succeed. And one should have expected that once we did succeed, almost against all odds, with a terrible sacrifice of life, with many, many fighting men who gave their lives, thousands and thousands and thousands, 6,000 dead, the largest number we have had in any single war since the inception, since the War of Independence. In all our other wars, we never reached that figure. One would have expected that we would have emerged from the War of Independence with the beginning of a feeling of self-confidence. And indeed, the subsequent wars in 1956, we won the battle. We afterwards lost the war, but we won the battle. We had to retreat, we had to withdraw because of international pressure. We won the battle of 1956. We won the Six-Day War in 1967. We won the war, the Yom Kippur War in 1973, although the first week of the war didn't go well for us. But the last part of the war found us within striking distance of Damascus, 100 kilometers from Egypt, from Cairo. And subsequent wars in 1982 and 1996, First Lebanese War, Second Lebanese War, the various confrontations we've had with the non-state actors, the Hezbollah in the north, the Hamas in the southwest. We, I think, had probably the most efficient and the most capable and the most proven defense capability in the region. And one would have expected, as a result of this, that we would think differently, we would feel differently, and we would act differently. But unfortunately, this is not the case. And unfortunately, we are always laboring under the threat or threats. And there are always threats to us which we feel are greater than before, or ominous than before, or dangerous than before. We're forever facing more and more threats. And instead of gaining confidence from our past victories, for some reason or other, we are always facing the threats with a large feeling, a deep feeling of trepidation. Fear is something natural. One should not be fearless. But nevertheless, Al tirani pachat pitom, says the Bard. Don't be afraid of sudden fear, or mishrat r'shayim kitavo. But we do fear. We fear for our families, we fear for our children, and we have this deep, ingrained fear which to some extent inhibits us in our activities. It inhibits us in the way we approach the enemy. One of the important elements in our security and defense system is our intelligence capability. We have an intelligence community, which I believe is second to none. I think the way we've organized ourselves with a very strong and effective military intelligence capability, with a security service which has real capabilities which are admired the world round. And we have a foreign intelligence service called the Mossad, which I think has performed miracles with some of the things that it has done. And the incessant concern we have, the attention we give to threats, is deeply ingrained in ourselves. And sometimes we always fear for the worst. I think we should assess the worst, but we don't have to be captive of the worst. We have to prepare for the worst, but we shouldn't think that the worst has a greater chance than somewhat less than the worst. And unfortunately, this guides and this influences the way we treat what it is that we are facing whenever it is. That is our first bias. The second bias we have is that we believe that our influence on our enemies, on their mindsets, is next to nil. But if our enemies have declared that they don't accept us, they don't want us around here, they don't accept our existence here, then this is a threat, the kind of which we cannot live with. Once it was the armies surrounding us. The states, the Arab states, who were united against us from 1948 until 1978, for 30 years. But we succeeded through a variety of actions that we took in breaking Arab solidarity against us. We succeeded in weeding away our most formidable enemy at the time, Egypt, which was considered the #1 enemy of Israel because the most capable, the strongest country in the Middle East at the time, in the Arab world. And when they broke away and they signed a separate peace with us, and this was followed by others, and I will speak about the others, surely we should have gained an enormous element, an enormous, shall we say, dose, injection of self-confidence. We realized something which was not in the cards as far as many people believe. We broke the alliance, we broke the solidarity, and from that moment on, as far as the Arab states were concerned, it was each to his own. And we conducted separate negotiations with the Palestinians, with the Jordanians, and with the Syrians, and with the Lebanese. One would have expected that we would not have demanded of them to recognize us. By the time we had reached these negotiations, we were a state. We were a member of the United Nations, the 59th member accepted in the United Nations. We had embassies, we had representations around the world. Not all the world. There were still elements, parts of the world, who were not all that friendly with us. But we had embassies in Washington and in Moscow. We had representations in Europe. When Africa became independent in the 60s, we showered embassies upon Africa. We had over 20 embassies in Africa in the 60s. We had a problem in Southeast Asia. It took a little longer. But the world as a whole accepted us as a member of the Community of Nations. And nevertheless, we've always come back to the necessity of demanding that they should recognize our right to exist. Why should they recognize our right to exist? Why do we need them to recognize our right to exist? I was in a discussion group a year and a half ago in London, King's College, facing a group of various Arab figures. And at the end of the day, there appeared a person who is called the Palestinian ambassador to the Court of St. James. Well, as you probably know, the Palestinians are not yet a state. But nevertheless, this gentleman, Hassanein from Bethlehem, is recognized as a chief of mission, and he has most of the privileges of a senior diplomat in London. And he got up and he said the following. He said, you know, it's so strange that you Israelis demand that we recognize your right to exist. What you're telling us is that if we don't recognize your right to exist, you don't have the right to exist. Because otherwise, why would you demand that we recognize your right to exist? It means to say that you depend on our recognition of your right to exist in order to clinch a deal. And I believe that this is part of our basic bias. We need the world to recognize us. But the world has recognized us. Now we already have also embassies and representations in Southeast Asia. We have an enormous embassy in China. We have consulates in China. We have a big embassy in Delhi. We have a consulate in Bombay. We have representations almost all over the world. We have an embassy in Cairo, not very active these days, but nevertheless. We have an embassy in Jordan. If we don't have embassies in other Arab states, it's partly because we don't believe that the conditions have been right or have been right in order for us to make a deal with them. We were very close to a deal with the Syrians, but we decided in the end we didn't want to go forward. Rightly or wrongly, doesn't matter. But why do we need them to recognize our right to exist? Not only that, we have convinced the so-called free world to accept this, to accept the fact that unless Hamas, for instance, recognizes Israel's right to exist, we will not talk to them. As if we don't talk to them. We talk to them all the time. We don't talk to them by telephone. We don't meet them. But we have a kind of a dialogue in which each one talks to the air, and then we listen and we hear what they say to the air. And we just did a deal with them. A good deal, a bad deal. And we say, by the way, whenever a rocket is fired from Gaza, that they are responsible for everything that happens in Gaza. Or in Hebrew, the word is Hem Achrayim, Achrayut. Now what is responsibility? It has a dual meaning. Responsibility is both that you are responsible, in other words, you are so-called guilty of this, but also means to say that we recognize the fact that you have the responsibility there. You are a power there. You are sovereign there. So we recognize that. So why the hell do we need them to recognize us? A few months ago, I attended a meeting with a couple of hundred people in the European capital, and there was a big Iranian representation there. Two senior Iranian ambassadors, including the Iranian ambassador to the IAEA agency in Vienna, which is in charge of overseeing the non-proliferation treaty. And the ambassador, whose name was Sultanieh, he was mentioned quite often in the Israeli radio, at one point got up and said that Israel must be forced to sign the non-proliferation treaty, which means to say that if we sign the non-proliferation treaty, we have to disclose whatever we have or don't have in the field of nuclear weapon. And we have, over the years, taken a position that we don't want to sign it. We don't say that we have nuclear weapons, but in the same breath we don't say that we don't have nuclear weapons. We prefer this state of opaqueness, it's called in English. Amimut in Hebrew. Amimut is opaque. And he got up and said, I demand that the conference pass a resolution that Israel must be forced to sign the treaty. And I, who was the leading spokesman of that conference, got up on part of Israel, got up and said that I welcome the demand. I think this is a great day. It's a day of celebration. Because only states can sign international treaties. And if the Iranian ambassador demands that Israel sign the treaty, for the first time in history we have heard an Iranian recognition of the state of Israel. And I applaud him. He jumped up, he said, no, they must sign the treaty, but we don't recognize Israel. And I say to you, it's not as if we have a problem here. They have a problem. They said to us, we are demanding that they recognize Israel as a Jewish state. Why should they recognize Israel as a Jewish state? Israel is a Jewish state. The 1947 resolution of the United Nations Assembly was that two states should be established on what was then Palestine, an Arab state and a Jewish state. And we are the Jewish state. So why do we need everybody else to accept that we are a Jewish state? If they don't accept that we're a Jewish state, we're not a Jewish state. Does our Jewishness depend on them? But no. We have this bias, we have this problem. We need them to recognize us. We need their recognition, as I said before, of our right to exist. We need them to recognize us as a Jewish state. And the Iranian referred to that as well. He said that he didn't think that Israel was a state, or as he called it, the Zionist entity, and he thought that ultimately this entity would disappear. But he said, look at the foolishness of all this demand. Is France called the Christian state of France? Is Britain called the Protestant state of Britain? Is Germany called the Catholic state of Germany? And I got up and I said, again, I accept what the Iranian said. Absolutely right. I think he's absolutely right. And I asked, why is it that the name of your country is the Islamic Republic of Iran? Cut out Islam. Erase it. What do you need it? You're the Republic of Iran. Why do you have to say the Islamic Republic of Iran? He said, oh no, they're different. Islamic is something different because it's the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, and so on and so forth. I said, if you want to call yourself an Islamic Republic, call yourself an Islamic Republic. I don't think it's necessary. As far as I'm concerned, you're not an Islamic Republic. You're a republic. Because you cannot mix religion with state. And I was glad that there weren't Israelis there who would say that, you know, we have a problem with the state when it comes to ourselves. Whether we've separated religion from state, I'm not sure. You probably know as much as I do about this. But nevertheless, what I'm trying to say is that as a result of these positions we take, we paint ourselves into a corner, unnecessarily. When we come to the Hamas and we say to them, you have 3 conditions without which we will not talk to you. You must renounce violence, fine. You must recognize all agreements made by previous administrations of the Palestinians, fine. But you must recognize Israel's right to exist. The Hamas says, number 1 and 2, we can talk about it. Number 3, never. And I say, never, never is never. We live without it. By the way, we signed a treaty with Egypt, and we did not demand them to exist our right, to accept our right to exist. We signed an agreement with Jordan, and we did not demand that they accept our right to exist. And if we were to sign an agreement tomorrow with Syria, I don't think we would demand that they would accept our right to exist. And we have a problem. We also have a problem with the fact that over the years, people change their minds and change their views as life goes on, as life develops. And we have successes here. But we cannot live with our successes. A few years ago, the leader of Hamas, Khaled Mashal, in several meetings which he had, which were then not disclosed and have not been disclosed to this day, at least formally, told leading diplomats, including American diplomats, that Hamas would accept provisionally a Palestinian state in provisional borders, the 67 borders, plus the return of refugees. But this would not be the ultimate settlement, this would be the provisional settlement. And we've dismissed this as nonsense. Because of our bias of what we've gone through over the years, we will not accept understandings which are provisional. We want it firm, unadulterated, final acceptance on the other side. A peace that will end all demands of us. There will be as they call it, the end of the conflict. We are asking for the end of the conflict. That is the expression used. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you a secret this evening, and I hope you don't divulge it. There'll never be an end to the conflict. There'll never be an end to the conflict. What we need to look for is not an end to a conflict. We need to translate the conflict into a conflict which is conflict that you live with on different terms. Countries have fought each other. Wars have been, over the years, over the thousands of years, have been fought between countries, between nations, between kingdoms. And the end has been, even if there has been an end to conflict, it's not been an end to conflict. World War I was ended by the signing of a treaty which was supposed to be the end of conflict. World War II was unconditional surrender of the Germans and the Japanese and end to conflict. It's an end to conflict. If you go to the home of a German at night and after he's drunk a few beers, do you know what he has to say about the Brits? I don't mention it in French, that's even worse. But it takes a different texture. It's different. You live with the conflict. Has there been an end to the conflict between Russia and Japan, for instance? The Russian-Japanese War was in 1905, which, if I'm not mistaken, is 107 years ago, and there has not been a peace treaty yet between the two. And they still haven't settled the borders between the two. So why should we demand that there be a final border after how long have we been around? 60 odd years? The final border between the United States and Mexico was signed in 1968. That was when the United States got its final borders. If I'm not mistaken, the final borders between the United States and Canada were not signed after 60 years on. It took longer. So why should we always want the ultimate? Why should we always want not just the chocolate, but the wrapping and the color and the ribbon around it, with the right colors of the ribbon? We have to have it complete. But life is not complete. Without wishing to offend you this evening, no human being is perfect, entirely perfect. We don't live in a world of perfection. Not in our daily conduct of our affairs, not in the affairs of state. Is the government of Israel a symbol of perfection? I wouldn't even like to put it to the vote this evening. So why are we always looking for the perfect? And not to mention the fact that we're talking about a provisional arrangement. Let me let you all into a little secret just between you and me this evening. All of our existences here this evening, all of us here this evening, we are provisional on this earth. Nobody yet has a permanent lease on life. It might come one day, I don't know. But as far as things are at the moment, none of us have a permanent lease on life. I remember in 1997 when there was the crisis between Israel and Jordan, when the Mossad group tried to send Khaled Mashal into a better world in the streets of Amman. And I was then called in to deal with it because I had a relationship with the king. I was then ambassador to the European Union. And the king of Jordan, King Hussein, the President Memory, didn't want to talk to anybody else. He didn't want to talk to me either, by the way. He said, you keep out of it. It's a sordid affair. I don't want to do this to soil our relationship. But anyway, in the end, I did deal with it, and I met him. And he told me that a week before the event, he had transmitted a message to the Israeli government with a proposal by the Hamas for a 30-year ceasefire, Hudna. And that he couldn't understand why it was that Israel had gone ahead with this operation, given the fact that he had sent a proposal which could be a breakthrough. I didn't know that, but when I came back, apparently, yes, the proposal had come. The Prime Minister had no idea of it, Mr. Netanyahu, but the head of the Mossad saw it, and he saw what it was, and he put it aside and said, this is not important, we'll deal with it some other time. Because the bias was that a hudna, a ceasefire, we accept the ceasefire. No, we want the real McCoy. Less than the real McCoy will not accept. When the Muslims reached the gates of Vienna in the 17th century, I think it was, and then they went back, and there was a hudna declared between Europe and the Muslim world. It has lasted now for over 300 years. A hudna. I don't want to between us and our neighbors. Any takers? You see?
On the other hand, there's a situation where all these other countries you compare are not being threatened with their annihilation by the other side. Nobody's saying Germany.
Okay. I'll come to the question of annihilation. I'll come to that in a moment.
Destroy the United States or Mexico.
I'll come to the issue of annihilation. Okay, in a moment. I accept that our enemies today are declared as wanting Israel's annihilation. But I will put it to you this evening that over the years, there's more and more evidence that they now understand, through bitter experience that they have gone through, that they don't have a chance to realize that. The problem is that they understand that they can't destroy us, but we don't understand that we are so strong that nobody can destroy us. And that is one of the most terrible biases that we have. As I said, we have won every war. We didn't have the luxury to lose even one war. But we won them. 60 years is not enough of experience to gain a little self-confidence. We say that it's dangerous to have a ceasefire with Hamas because they will use it to rearm. Let's imagine we had a 30-year truce with the Hamas. Do you think that after 30 years, if we handled ourselves properly, and if we kept up our vigilance, and we kept our military capability, and we kept our intelligence capability, after 30 years of the Hudna, those who are the 20-year-old terrorists of today, at the age of 50, 50 plus, with their portly bellies and their arched backs and the good life that they enjoyed, they're going to go back after 30 years to become terrorists. And if they use the time in order to try and get the upper hand, don't we have the advantage of doing the same and preserving our upper hand? Why do we belittle ourselves so much? Why don't we have a little self-confidence? Why do we always have to carp back to the time when, in the 30s, Hitler got up and did it? But at the time of Hitler, there was no Jewish state. Is there no difference between what happened then and what is happening now? There's a basic difference. We can defend ourselves, we've proven we can defend ourselves, and we've beaten them all the time. So shouldn't this be a moment in which we look again at this ingrained bias of ours, that we always believe that there is somebody who has it in his capability to destroy us? And this brings me, of course, inevitably to the Iranian issue. Yes, the Iranians are a formidable enemy. Yes, they are trying to get a nuclear capability. Yes, they have scored certain successes. But I put it to you that they understand what their failures are. And they, I think, are also beginning to understand the hard way. And if it becomes necessary, we'll teach them in an even harder way. That they will never, never, never see themselves overcoming us. Because we're vigilant, because we have the information, we have the ingenuity, we have the originality, and we know how to conduct ourselves. Do we make mistakes? Yes, we make mistakes from time to time. All in all, we are a power in this region. The Israeli Minister of Defense, Ehud Barak, has been quoted as saying very often that Israel is the strongest power within 1,500 kilometers radius of Jerusalem. He says it time and time again. And I think he's absolutely right. We are a regional power. We have international capabilities almost second to none. So if we are a power, shouldn't we talk like a power? Shouldn't we behave like a power? Shouldn't we accept only the fruits of a power in the end? This is not a time for us to cower behind shields. This is not a time for us to fret for our existence. And that is the last bias I wanted to mention this evening. Now, a power also has to play the game of nations, the game of a power. If you take our Tanakh, the Bible, and you read the prophets, not from the point of view of their religious and their poetry and so forth, their religious beliefs and poetry, but read the poets, read the prophets as a political documents, because each of the prophets was a political figure at the time. And you see the struggle between those who said we should join up with the Egyptians and those who said no, we should join up with the Assyrians or whoever it was, or the Babylonians and so forth. We have behaved in the past, in the days of the Second Temple particularly, and we have more or less over centuries we were able to preserve our independence. When we failed was when we miscalculated the game of powers. But up to now we have not miscalculated the game of powers when it comes to the international scene. And Israel, from its inception, has placed itself in the camp of the free world. And David Ben-Gurion, who was the first Prime Minister of Israel in 1951, was absent from Israel on Israel's third Independence Day. And he spent time in Washington in talks with President Truman, with other figures, including General Walter Beadle Smith, who at the time was the director of the CIA. And in a meeting, the contents of which have not been published hitherto, Mr. Ben-Gurion assured the United States intelligence and defense community that come what may, whatever the political differences and views and so forth between Israel and the United States, Israel would always consider itself part of the free world and would act as such. And this was a very brave statement to be made, because what you may not remember, and I'm not sure there are many people in this hall who remember it, that during the War of Independence in 1948, the United States slapped an arms embargo on Israel. And American Jews were arraigned, stood trial and sent to jail for trying to smuggle arms to Israel. And it took 20 years, from 48 to 68, before the United States began to supply us with arms. But we nevertheless placed ourselves in the camp of the free world, notwithstanding the fact that at that time 5 million Jews behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. And we nevertheless said, no, we will be part of the free world. And without going into any detail whatsoever, I can tell you that we played a very, very important role at certain times in making our contribution to the well-being of the free world in very sensitive issues, in very sensitive areas. So if we are a nation which knows how to project itself as a power, not only inside the region, but outside the region. In Africa, when in the 60s, we had, as I said earlier on, over 20 embassies there in Africa, in growing Africa. In every almost African state, we were those who trained in armies of of these new states. But we're not only in the field of military and defense issues. We help them in the field of agriculture. We help them how to organize their production of food. And food is a very, very key element in the world today. And this is going to become even more a problem in the next decade, where there'll be 1 billion more people on this earth. There's not enough food to feed them and not enough water produced in order for them to drink and have potable water. So Israel has capabilities, it has potentialities which are beyond description. And I don't want to speak about the science and technology and the Nobel Prizes and medicine and physicism and the Weizmann Institute and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and the research on the brain. I'm afraid of the research on the brain because I'm not sure what it produces as far as the Jewish brain is concerned. But if we have all this, we have such a vibrant society, shouldn't we be a little more relaxed in the way we look upon ourselves? Why must we always cower in the shelter? I don't think we should. I remember in 1991, when we had the first Iraqi war, and the Iraqis started shelling us with Scud missiles. The streets of Tel Aviv were empty. There were no parking problems, none whatsoever. Eilat was full, Jerusalem was full. Tel Aviv was a ghost city. Many people sent their children abroad. The planes carrying children to Switzerland and all kinds of places like that were full. This should not happen. It should not happen. It's tough sometimes. Yes, it's tough. War is tough. But you know, in all these Scud attacks, there were 39 Scuds. Like the 39 lashes, you know. There be 39 Scuds. And the number of our casualties was 1 person dead of a heart attack, not of a Scud. We had the war in the north with the rockets and the missiles. Yes, they fired, I think, something between 4,000 and 5,000 rockets. In all the hostilities that we had in the north, there were over 30-year days of fighting, we lost 161 people. Grievous loss. Grievous loss. When I say 161 people, I say both military and civilians. $4,000 or so missiles. The fact that they have 200,000 missiles, as the Chief of Military Intelligence said a couple of weeks ago, yes, missiles and projectiles and things like that, they can't fire them all at the same time. Is it a threat? Yes, it's a threat. Once you recognize a threat, you have to know how to take care of it. And I tell you this evening that Israel has always had its problems when it does not recognize the threat. When we recognize the threat, every time we recognize the threat properly, then we got it right. So, are we victims of our biases? As I asked this evening in the title of my presentation here this evening. To some extent, yes, we're victims. And I think we should take advantage of our growing age, a country which is 60-odd years and no longer a youngster, but not too old yet, to try and rid ourselves at least of parts of our biases, to be self-confident, not to be headstrong, but to be self-confident, to have confidence in our capabilities, confidence in what we can do, and live a normal life. Because we're living normal lives here. And in all this region we're living in, we're the only ones who are living a normal life. And one last comment. When we signed the agreement with the Palestinians, the then Foreign Minister, Mr. Peres, who is now the President of the State of Israel, wrote a book and promoted what he called the New Middle East. And what he wanted was, amongst other things, to create a Middle East, a joint economic unit of the Middle East, just as you have the European Common Market, and there's the Asian Common Market, and there's the Mercosur, which is the common market in Latin America. There will be the common market between us and the Egyptians, and then we all come together, we have joint economies, we'll have a Middle East bank. And he said that he thought that the headquarters should be in Cairo, of course, and of course he also thought that the director of the bank should be an Israeli, after all, which of course encouraged the Egyptians to reject this. But imagine for a moment that the countries around us would have accepted this, and we'd have had a common market with the Egyptians, with the Syrians, with the so on and so forth. And then would come what we call the Arab Spring. Can you imagine the havoc that this would have caused on Israel's economy? So wasn't it not a blessing in disguise that the world around us rejected the idea of a common market? And wasn't it better for us to develop our markets in Southeast Asia and in Europe and the United States and elsewhere? Sometimes rejection is also a blessing in disguise. Certain types of rejection. Sometimes it's better not to be part of everything. Sometimes it's better to be standalone. Well, I've spoken for over an hour, and I probably exhausted you more than you had bargained for. So I'd like to apologize to you for keeping you up at this wintry night so late. But if you have a question or two, and if this is allowed by the powers that be, as represented by the gentleman here, then I'd be willing to answer them to the best of my ability. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as an undiplomatic question. There's only an undiplomatic answer.
Really didn't talk much food for thought. So gracious enough to answer a few questions. So we're at Cashman from the Jerusalem Post.
Mr. Halevi, both you and Mayor Dagan have become very loquacious since leaving the Mossad. Both you and Mayor Dagan have become very loquacious since leaving the Mossad. You're telling us things that you never would have dreamt of telling us when you were working there. What has prompted you to say the things that you say?
I must admit, I don't think I've said anything this evening which is different than I said before. If you feel that you've heard things that you've not heard before... No,
I've heard things since you left the Mossad.
That you've not heard before? If I had told you a secret that I don't know, please tell me so I don't have to say it again. Look, hard as it is, I don't speak for Mayor Dagan, and he doesn't speak for me. We have a tacit agreement, you know. We didn't discuss that it's like between Israel and Hamas. We don't talk to each other, but we communicate with each other. Okay? That's just a facetious remark. Once we left government service, we become, normal citizens of this country. For some reason or other, there is a demand for us to speak from time to time. Every time something happens, I get 30 or 40 telephone calls, will you speak on this network or that network, and so on and so forth. In recent weeks, I've been very active on Japanese television. I'm told it's been very good. So it came over in Japanese, millions of Japanese have heard me in Japanese. It's very, very encouraging. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as we don't tell you what we've been doing in the Mossad when we were there. And I haven't said anything this evening about Mossad, what the Mossad has done, and as far as I'm concerned, it hasn't done anything.
On the issue of recognizing Israel as a Jewish state, could you not argue that it's less about us trying to feel good about ourselves, but rather the repercussions that come from it?
I can't understand what you're saying. Excuse me.
You argued that we want the Palestinians to recognize us as a Jewish state because we feel that we need to feel legitimate. But could you not argue that it's not about that at all? It's more about the repercussions that come from recognizing the Jewish state.
Look, I don't think that our legitimacy depends on whether they recognize us. As far as I'm concerned, they can go to hell. I've often said to Palestinians, you know, I don't think that you need to recognize us. For that matter, I don't recognize you. I think you are usurpers in this part of the world. You have nothing to do in this part of the world. You were not a state before. You were not a political entity before. You just roamed the country. You destroyed and made this land destitute for 2,000 years. Now people have come back and reclaimed it. That's all. But why do we need them to recognize us? To hell with them.
Not arguing that we do, I think.
But what could be the repercussions? What repercussions do you think of?
Palestinian refugees couldn't like a future two-state solution of both states.
But we're not going to accept the Palestinian refugees anyway, whether we recognize or not recognize. We're not going to allow Palestinian refugees back. Very simple. If they come back, we have no point in staying here. And by the way, we have nowhere to go because all the places we came from were very happy to get rid of us. And I think, you know, it was a mutual interest. But I'll tell you something else. In 1946, I was in England, and one day the Irgun Tzvei Leumi, one of the groups, Israeli Jewish groups who were fighting against the British, hung 2 British sergeants in Netanya. And it was a very, very, very somber affair from many points of view, and it caused a lot of revulsion in Britain. The following day I went to school. I didn't go to a Jewish school, I went to a public school. And in one of the breaks, a group of school children sat on me and accosted me, and they beat me. And I came back with a black eye and a few other things as well. My father saw me, he said, you know, if that's the situation, off we come to Israel. Not to Israel, to Palestine. And it took us a year or two, and we came in April 1948, 1 month before the state was established. And I had a family here in Jerusalem, but Jerusalem was under siege. It was not possible to get here. So we were staying in Tel Aviv with some relatives and so on, and then the people who dealt with immigrants, and not many immigrants at the time, but nevertheless dealt with them, and said, let's send them to Netanya. So they sent me to Netanya. And we were in Netanya, and the following day my father said, it was April, May, it was a waste of time to send you up, we'll send you to school. So they sent me to school, and the next day, the children in one of the breaks, they beat me up because they said that I was a prick. And ever since I've had this, schizophrenia.
To return in part to the previous question.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I say to return in part to the previous question.
Yes.
Do you think there would be a value in the Arab world recognizing the legitimacy of our claim to any of this land? Or is the opposite? Is there refusal to accept our legitimate historical claim to this land in any way preventing our having a decent relationship with it?
I put it this way, if 57 states will establish the relations with Israel, and that is what the Arab Initiative said, if we accept the Arab Initiative of 2002, which was originally launched by the Saudi Crown Prince, who's now the King of Saudi Arabia, if we accept that, then 57 Muslim states will establish diplomatic relations with Israel. Okay? And I put it to you that if tomorrow morning 57 states establish diplomatic relations with Israel, that is recognition. What is it? If they don't say, we recognize their right to exist, we set up an embassy. If they crowd Jerusalem now, and as a result of this they create a major problem of real estate, and all the prices go up because they need all the best houses in Jerusalem. And you'll have rows and rows of houses in Talbiya and Rehabia. All of them, you know, this will be Egypt, and this will be Saudi Arabia, and this will be Qatar, and this will be Yemen, and this will be Pakistan, and this will be Afghanistan. 57 Islamic states. And then it doesn't say they recognize our right to exist. You really feel that you'll still feel, you know, it's not enough, you know, they have to sign a piece of paper, we recognize you. Facts speak more than words. We become so legalistic and so entwined. You know, we're generally realistic. I mean, we are, you know, in this country, you know, if the Bagas doesn't say anything, it doesn't exist. You know, if the High Court of Justice doesn't say something, nothing has been said. They have to deal with everything. You know, with the wash basins and with the future of the state of Israel and the Haredim and all the rest of it. This is madness we've reached here. You try and go to the Jerusalem municipality and get them to give you an agreement to add half a meter to some room. You know how many lawyers have to deal with it? A legion of lawyers. Because everyone is expert on one other sentence. We become tied up with all this. And it's a mistake, it's a terrible mistake.
Iran got nuclear weapons, is it a legitimate concern that they would give it to a non-state actor to use it?
Who had it?
If Iran had, to give it to a non-state actor so it would be not directly attributable to identified location?
I think that the issue of proliferation, non-proliferation of weapons, of nuclear weapons, is one of the most serious threats to the peace of the Middle East, to Israel, and to the world as a whole. And if, as a result of Iran getting a nuclear capability, there will be proliferation in every country in the Middle East will want its little bomb, this is a very, very big danger. But I'll put to you a question which was put to me a few months ago. I was on the west coast of the United States in the Ronald Reagan Library, a beautiful place, by the way. Anybody here has not been there, I recommend you going there. There was an international conference there of a group called Global Zero, which was set up in order to rid the world of nuclear weapons. And I'm also for ridding the world of nuclear weapons. I'm sure everybody in this room would like the world to be rid of nuclear weapons. So, you know, it's like saying, you know, that all the world would like apple pie and vanilla ice cream. Everybody likes it. And a leading American diplomat, former diplomat, but a man who had been a senior diplomat, who had been the ambassador to Germany, and who had been the chief negotiator of Ronald Reagan when they negotiated with the Russians on the first treaty of reducing the nuclear arms. He said to me, I'd like to ask you a question. What would you prefer? That all the states in the Middle East would have nuclear capabilities, or none of the states would have nuclear capability? What is your choice? I said, you know, maybe there's something in between. He said, no, let's imagine tomorrow morning you had a choice between two things. Everybody has nuclear weapons, or nobody has nuclear weapons. What would you prefer? I didn't give him an answer. And I don't expect you to give me an answer. But I put it to you, and think about it. You know, it's the question of the week, since I would put it. Another two. This gentleman here, he's working hard.
You referred before, very effectively, I might say, to the usefulness of provisional agreements. I wonder if you comment to the possibility that in offering provisional agreements, we're asked, meaning Israel is asked, to give up assets, such as land. Would you comment?
Yes, I think that the provisional agreement would have to give some of the land up in return for a provisional agreement. But the alternative is no agreement. And the fallacy is, this is one other bias that we have, we believe that there is such a thing in the world as a status quo. There's no such thing as a status quo. You can preserve your positions, but the environment around you is forever moving. Every day, just as the world is rotating around the sun, or the sun is rotating through the earth, which you like to look at it, things are changing. And if you stand the way you are, the ground beneath you has moved. If we don't move, we in the end will have a one state. Is that a good solution? I believe a provisional agreement is better than no agreement. And I believe a no agreement ultimately is a disaster. Because we will not be able to give the people in this area of Palestine will not be able to prevent them from voting or to deny them the vote and say, no, you can't vote. We are voting. This is apartheid. And I don't think we can not because the world doesn't accept it. I think the DNA of the Jewish people will not accept it. So when we have this problem, this clear problem of two solutions, both of them are not perfect. Both of them have their problems. I think that the one-state solution in the end conjures up a clear end where Jewish population will become a minority. I had a discussion on this a year or two ago with an Arab professor in Israel, who was the vice president of Haifa University, Professor Al-Hajj, professor of sociology. And his area is he studies the society in Israel. He's an expert on the Haredi movement and on the Masorti movement and on the reform movement and so on and so forth. Okay? And he said to me, he said, we're making a big mistake. We should not be agitating for a Palestinian state. Because in the end we're going to have it all for ourselves. In the end we're going to be a majority. I said, how so? Because you're 20-odd%. He said, well, we're 20-odd% and so forth. And then of course there are Christians here and others. And we are growing all the time. And we are going to have the foreign workers here, which is part of us, 500,000, which will become 1 million. And by the way, he said, the Russian Jews are Jews who came here because you said they were Jews. And when they came here, you told them that they're not Jews. And they will be with us in here.
Who is us? When he says us, who does he mean?
All those who are not Jews are us. The non-Jews will be more than the Jews. Because, amongst other things, of the 1 million-odd Russians who came here, there are hundreds of thousands who we brought them over as Jews, and then when they came here, we threw them out from the rabbinical courts and said, you're not Jews. And when they went to serve in the army and they, God forbid, got killed, we buried them in separate cemeteries. Which was always very wise. That's the ultimate wisdom of the Jewish people.
The last question.
Yes, last.
I have a very small voice. I hope you can hear me. Your presentation is actually of rationality, post-enlightenment thinking, theological. Can I ask you, if you were to use, without diplomats, kings, rulers, whatever, you found a reciprocal rationality or an emotionalism which prevented the exchange of clear, rational, factual feelings?
Okay. The question is, in my dealings with the Arabs, were they as rational? You said that I was very rational this evening, which I take it as a compliment. I thank you for it. And the question was, did I reach the same rationality The question was, did I mean the same rationality from the interlocutors? First of all, one shouldn't generalize. Okay. Both as far as the Arabs are concerned and as far as the Israelis are concerned. Okay. Not all the Israelis are entirely rational. There are shades of rationality in Israel as well. Okay. Without going into the details. But I would say this, I have met many very rational people amongst the other side, yes. Very rational people. Are they emotional? Yes, they're emotional as well. But so am I emotional. When I read that they're destroying the remnants of the Jewish presence on the Temple Mount, I am not rational. But I knew this 15 and 20 years ago. I visited Temple Mount 15, 20 years ago, and I saw what they were doing. And I said to the man who accompanied me, who was a senior member of the Israeli Security Service, Shabak, who later became head of the Shabak, I said, how do you allow this? He said, the government doesn't allow me to intervene. So was this a rational decision of the Israeli government not to intervene, to let them do what they want on Temple Mount? Well, we will overcome that as well. I want to thank you very much for your infinite patience. I want to tell you it was a pleasure talking to you. And you have come over from Australia, go back home. We visited, my wife and I, visited Australia twice in the last few years. We enjoyed Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra and Perth and the Gold Coast. And although everything is wonderful there, if you decide to come over here, you'll have the greatest time in the world. Believe me. Thank you.
It will be a rare privilege and pleasure for all of us to hear Ephraim speak, and we're so happy you came. And here's a very small token. There are two books. One tells you what we are about the building, and the other one tells you who we are, which is a book by Rabbi Reuven Hammer called The Torah Revolution. And so I don't think you're going to take away as much as we're taking away from tonight, but thank you very, very much for coming. Thank you.
We all know that Jack is going into the hospital in the next couple of days to have an operation. And I'd like to express a sentiment to all of us, including you, and saying to you, Refuah Shlema.